For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 951, I call up H.R. 845 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 285, H.R. 845, a bill to require the Secretary of the Interior to reissue regulations removing the gray wolf from the list of endangered and threatened wildlife under the Endangered Species Act of 1973.
Pursuant to House Resolution 951, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources, printed in the bill, is adopted, and the bill, as amended, is considered read. The bill, as amended, shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources or their respective designee. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, and the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Hoyle, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 845.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as we're getting close to breaking for the Christmas holiday, I'm glad that this last bill the Natural Resources Committee will offer is one that we will have a debate on that resolves an issue that has united the Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump administrations alike. Not sure there's another issue like that out there, but this is one of them. Because each of those administrations has agreed that the gray wolf is a recovered species and should be removed from the Endangered Species Act, or ESA protection. H.R. 845, the Pet and Livestock Protection Act, sponsored by Representatives Boebert and Tiffany, instructs the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to reissue its 2020 final rule that delisted the gray wolf from the list of threatened and endangered species in the entire lower 48 states. Recovery of the gray wolf is a true ESA success story, and there aren't a lot of them. In the 1970s, the species was at risk in the lower 48 states. Today, the gray wolf numbers in the thousands across the Great Lakes and Rocky Mountains, with each of these populations being connected to tens of thousands of wolves in Canada. The first Trump administration recognized the successful recovery and issued a delisting rule for gray wolves in the lower 48 states. Unfortunately, this rule was vacated by a federal judge in California in a blatant instance of judicial activism. But don't just take my word for it. The Biden administration appealed the California judge's vacature of the 2020 Trump rule, arguing, and I quote, "The district court misunderstood the ESA's clear mandate and compounded that error by imposing its own review of the science," end quote. By every sensible definition, the gray wolf is a recovered species, and that recovery should be celebrated as a success of the ESA. Gray wolf populations are healthy and thriving in every region in which they are found. The Great Lakes region has the largest concentration of gray wolves in the lower 48 states, with approximately 4,200 wolves inhabiting Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Moreover, this population is connected to at least 12,000 to 14,000 wolves in central Canada. The western United States is also home to roughly 2,500 wolves, including already delisted populations in Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Wyoming. This population is connected to over 15,000 wolves in western Canada. The Biden administration's own science determined that wolves in the western United States had a healthy abundance, retained genetic diversity, could respond to high mortality events, and maintained adaptive capacity. Most of these wolves reside in states where they have already been delisted. The science is clear. Gray wolves have recovered in the lower 48 states, and it's time to return their management to the states which have managed and will continue to manage wolf populations responsibly. I encourage my colleagues to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're here in D.C. during the final week before the holidays. Families back home are struggling with the increasing costs of groceries, housing affordability, natural disaster recovery, and health care. That's what we should be working on. Instead, what has Republican leadership scheduled this week? A bill that's routinely used in Congress to kill time on the floor and that will go nowhere in the Senate. H.R. 845, the Pet and Livestock Protection Act, would strip federal endangered species protection from gray wolves and block courts from reviewing that decision. This bill would force the Interior Department to reissue a 2020 Trump rule to delist the gray wolves that was struck down by a federal court in 2022. Why was it struck down? Because a Republican-appointed judge found it failed to use the best available science, didn't consider threats to wolves outside core populations, and ignored the needs across their entire range, all in violation of the Endangered Species Act. Instead of accepting that decision, this bill doubles down on bad science and even prevents courts from weighing in. If you're sure wolves have recovered, then there's no need to block judicial review. But that's not the case here. Instead, my colleagues want to remove endangered species protections because of politics instead of science, and that's not how the Endangered Species Act works. Wolves are an Endangered Species Act success story. Their population has increased from fewer than 1,000 animals to over 6,000 today, but recovery remains fragile and incomplete. Wildlife management should be based on science and collaboration. Our natural heritage and the health of our ecosystems are worth protecting for future generations. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, and I'm looking forward to hearing further discussions from my colleagues. And I reserve.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Colorado, the lead sponsor of this legislation, Ms. Boebert.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for helping lead on this issue. And I want to say thank you to my colleague, Representative Tom Tiffany, who has also been instrumental in this piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, Colorado is at the center of our nation for wolf battles. That's why Congressman Tom Tiffany and I introduced H.R. 845, the Pet and Livestock Protection Act. My bill delists the gray wolf from the federal endangered species list and returns the issue of wolf management to the states and tribal wildlife agencies. This doesn't mean that wolves will not be managed. It just means that the federal government will step aside and we will have proper state management. I think we believe in federalism here in the 10th Amendment and trust our states to do the right thing. Leftists want to eliminate hunting, lock up our lands, further restrict gun rights, and pander to the interests of extreme environmentalists who don't understand our rural way of life. In 2020, in Colorado, Denver and Boulder voted to reintroduce gray wolves west of the Continental Divide. This ballot box biology has led Colorado to rush through the importation of Canadian gray wolves and has set them loose in our state despite numerous protests and questions about the legality of this dysfunctional and chaotic approach, putting predators over people. And these predators do not obey arbitrary boundaries. Sure, Colorado may say they will be introduced west of the Continental Divide, but that doesn't keep them west, and that doesn't necessarily keep them in Colorado either, as we have seen. Importing foreign predators into our state has received pushback from our tribes, energy operators, and our farmers and ranchers. ESA restrictions prohibit ranchers and pet owners from protecting their livestock and pets, as ranchers who shoot at, injure, or kill protected wolves stalking sheep or cattle face potential prosecution. Unfortunately, wolves, again, don't see state lines. They don't know the difference between state, federal, tribal, or private land. It's in their nature to travel great distances in pursuit of prey, whether that's deer, elk, sheep, cattle, or even our pets. And it's been well documented that wolves don't only hunt to satisfy their need, to satisfy their hunger. They also hunt for sport. In March of this year, one of the Canadian wolves attacked and killed a working cattle dog in Jackson County, Colorado, neighboring one of the counties that I represent in my district. Last year, a gray wolf from the Great Lakes region was found over 1,000 miles away in Elbert County, east of the Continental Divide, in Colorado's 4th District, where I represent. Colorado's agricultural producers have lost $580,000 in just 1 year from wolves already introduced. We should listen to our farmers and ranchers and finally delist the gray wolf. Gray wolves were first listed under the ESA in 1967. That's 58 years ago. Since then, delisting the gray wolves has been supported by the Obama, Trump, and even Biden administrations. In November 2020, scientists and nonpartisan career employees at the Department of Interior once again found gray wolves were fully recovered and once again issued a rule that returned management of the gray wolf populations to state and tribal wildlife agencies, as it should be. Unfortunately, frivolous litigation was filed by environmental extremists, and an activist California judge pandered to them by vacating the 2020 rule and unilaterally relisting the gray wolf by judicial fiat. Mr. Speaker, the science is crystal clear on this issue. Gray wolves should no longer be on the endangered species list. We can no longer put farmers, ranchers, and even our pets in harm's way by using taxpayer dollars to protect a species that has been fully recovered. It's time for the federal government to get out of the way and allow the state and tribal wildlife agencies to manage this species. Again, just as my colleague on the other side of the aisle agrees, this is an Endangered Species Act success story, and I urge support in my bill. I yield.
The gentlelady yields. The gentleman reserves. The chair lays before the House the following enrolled bill.
Senate 1071, an act to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2026 for military activities of the Department of Defense, for military construction, and for defense activities of the Department of Energy, to prescribe military personnel strengths for such fiscal year and for other purposes.
The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When my colleagues say an activist judge overturned this, it was a Republican-appointed judge that found, again, that it failed to use the best available science. I also want to say that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service just canceled the first ever nationwide gray wolf recovery plan, which was due this month. This comprehensive science-based plan would have finally provided a holistic approach to wolf recovery with all stakeholders at the table. This is the type of solution that the courts have been seeking after invalidating 5 of the 6 previous attempts to delist wolves. Unfortunately, H.R. 845 is part of a pattern. Instead of investing time and money into supporting proven paths of success, we're voting on far-reaching and unscientific proposals that don't actually solve the problem and won't make it into law. H.R. 845 would also fragment and make wolf management harder. So with that, I would like to yield 4 minutes to the gentlewoman from Michigan.
The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we are witnessing an unprecedented extinction crisis with 1 million species at risk of disappearing forever in coming decades. As the co-chair of the Endangered Species Act, protecting our nation's wildlife is one of my top priorities. I am deeply concerned that the provisions included in this bill will cause our country to backtrack on the progress we made, and that's why I have to be opposed today to the bill on the floor, the so-called Pet and Livestock Protection Act. There's been a lot of discussion about the gray wolf. Well, let's talk about the delisting of the gray wolf under the Endangered Species Act. While progress has been made in certain regions, the reality is clear. Gray wolves have not yet achieved full recovery, and removing federal protections would be premature and dangerous. Today, wolves occupy only a fraction of their historic range. Large areas of suitable habitat remain unoccupied, and many existing populations are small, isolated, and genetically vulnerable. True recovery under the Endangered Species Act requires not just survival in a few regions, but long-term security across a significant portion of the species range. We also know from experience what happens when protections are lifted too soon. After previous delisting efforts, several states moved quickly to authorize aggressive hunting and trapping seasons. And in some cases, wolf populations declined sharply within one single year. These setbacks erase decades of conservation progress and create instability rather than sound wildlife management. Gray wolves play a vital role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. As apex predators, they help regulate prey populations, they reduce overgrazing, and promote the recovery of forests and watersheds. These ecological benefits support biodiversity and contribute to healthier landscapes that benefit hunters, farmers, outdoor recreation, and rural communities alike. Some argue that delisting is necessary to address conflicts with livestock and local communities, but science tells a different story. Broad lethal control does not reliably reduce livestock losses and can actually increase conflicts by disrupting pack structure. Non-lethal tools such as range riders, flattery, improved husbandry practices, and fair compensation programs have proven to be far more effective and deserve continued investment. The Endangered Species Act is one of the most successful conservation laws in our nation's history. It sets clear, science-based standards for recovery and requires that threats be adequately addressed before protections are removed. Delisting gray wolves without enforceable, science-based state management plans undermines both the intent of the law and public trust. And this decision is about more than one species. It's about whether we let politics override science, or whether we uphold our responsibility to protect wildlife for future generations. Until gray wolves are truly recovered, connected across the range, and protected by durable management plans, federal protections must remain in place. That's why attempts to delist the gray wolves through congressional action are opposed by scientists, conservation groups, and the majority of Americans across the political spectrum. For these reasons, I urge my colleagues to oppose delisting and to stand with science, conservation, and the rule of law.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I yield back.
Thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from Oregon reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to state again, the gray wolf is an ESA recovery success story. We should be celebrating this. Now, while gray wolves might not currently occupy all of their historic range, they do not meet the criteria for listing under the ESA. This was confirmed by the Biden administration, as with previous administrations before. Now, most species are not found throughout their historic range. Elk and black bears, for example, are still absent from much of their historic range, but they are not listed under the ESA. According to my colleague's argument, the wolf can't be recovered until it's back into its entire historic range. Mr. Speaker, the Northeast United States is part of the historic range of the gray wolf. If what I'm hearing right is correct, are we promoting restoring the wolf to the northeastern United States with the metropolitan and suburban areas where packs of wolves can range 100 miles a day? Is that what we want to make the criteria before we say gray wolves are recovered? The scientists at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in the Biden administration, along with the ones in the Trump administration, the Obama administration, and the Bush administration, have said the gray wolf is recovered. This is just another push to continue a top-down federal approach to wildlife management that does little to actually help wildlife. Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin Mr. Tiffany.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to suggest to the gentle lady from Michigan, if she wants to do a ride-along with me and deliver wolves to Madison, Wisconsin, part of their previous range, I would be happy to do that if she would join along in that process. I just want to address one thing in regards to the gentle lady from Oregon. We've got really good news, what she talked about in regards to inflation. I urge her to watch CNN this morning with the inflation numbers that have come out that are the lowest since 2021. Good news as we end 2025, and it is really good news as we go into 2026 that the Pet and Livestock Protection Act is going to pass out of the House of Representatives today. Federal protections were established a couple decades ago, and there were hundreds of wolves in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. Now there are over 4,000 wolves. Talk about inflation. It has hit the wolf population. Also, if you go back to 2015, 26 of the most eminent wildlife biologists in the upper Midwest urged these judges to delist the wolf, take them off the Endangered Species Act because the wolf is recovered, as the data has shown. Populations have been bouncing back and forth between being listed and delisted, and this bill provides a permanent solution, returning the population management back to the states. As everyone in Wisconsin knows, this is something we've seen far too often. Most recently, when the judge in Oakland, California, vacated the 2020 delisting rule and unilaterally put it back on the ESA list by judicial fiat. Wisconsinites know best when it comes to managing Wisconsin's wolf population, and it's long past time we empowered Wisconsinites to be able to manage the gray wolf population once again. The chairman handled it in a very positive manner. This is a recovery success under the Endangered Species Act. This is the graphic representation of what is happening, the carnage that is happening across our states in rural areas where pets and livestock are being slaughtered because the wolf is not being managed. You talk to any sportsman, and they will tell you the wolf belongs on the landscape. But when you do not manage a wildlife population, this is what happens. The slaughter continues of people's pets and livestock. Gray wolf delisting has been supported by 4 presidents. Even the Biden administration's Fish and Wildlife Service asked a federal appeals court last fall to reinstate the rule. The gray wolf has been the latest recovery success, with significant populations in the Rocky Mountains and Western Great Lakes. There's something else we should all remember. When a species is removed from the ESA list, it's something we should celebrate. From farmers to pet owners to sportsmen and women, delisting the great wolf is of paramount importance to rural America and maintain.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In order to maintain our rural way of life, the wolf needs to be delisted. It's past time to return management to the states. This is a legislative fix we can do. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. I urge the United States Senate to pass this bill when it comes over to them, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the words of my good friend from Wisconsin. I invite him to come to my district, where the manufacturers in my district are paying more for goods that they have to import to build things in the U.S., and my farmers and wine producers and exporters are losing their markets, so have less money to pay for the things where the prices have risen for their Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, and presents. But you are welcome to come. Also, the issue with H.R. 45, after the 2020 delisting, in Wisconsin, 30% of its wolf population was killed in just 4 days. Idaho passed a law allowing the killing of up to 90% of wolves, including the pups. Montana removed wolf protections around Yellowstone, raising bag limits and expanded trapping, killing many of the beloved wolves that tourists travel from around the world to see. And the ecological consequences matter. Wolves are a keystone species critical to healthy ecosystems. When reintroduced to Yellowstone in 1995, they provided benefits throughout the entire ecosystem. Wolves changed elk behavior, allowing willows and aspens to recover. They brought back beaver, whose dams created habitats for fish, amphibians, and birds. One study found a 1,500% increase in the willow growth, surpassing 82% of tropic cascades in global analysis. And recently, we've seen evidence that wolves are helping to protect deer and elk populations from the spread of chronic wasting disease, a horrifying neurological disease rampaging through the states and causing real problems for hunters. The state of Oregon has worked to lead the way in wolf recovery, but there's only so much we can do if neighboring wolf populations are wiped out. We want to see recovery, get the environmental benefits, and also make sure that our ranchers are compensated for any losses that occur. And with that, I would like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, my good friend, Representative Beyer.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 4 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. As co-chair of this House Endangered Species Caucus, I rise today in strong opposition to H.R. 845. This bill, formerly called the Trust in Science Act, has gone under a rebrand since the best available science contradicts this politically motivated bill. I'm here to remind the American people of some key facts underlying this bill. First, a small reminder, people are predators too. In fact, we're the most successful apex predator of all time. This has the deeply unpopular Project 2025's name all over this. Look at page 534, Part 3, Section 16, where delisting the gray wolf is listed as the second highest priority for the Department of Interior, just behind delisting the grizzly bear. Despite the Trump administration's incompetence and chaos, we have not forgotten about the direction coming from Project 2025 and the damage already done to our country. Second, this bill fails to recognize the status of gray wolves today, taking us back to an outdated rulemaking that didn't hold up in court. It's important to recognize state-by-state differences in wolf recovery, but also in state-sanctioned predation. What does the best available recovery science say today? That's what we should be supporting. Gray wolf recovery goals are outdated, and they need to be updated, and that's what we should be working on instead of this extinction effort, and that's what this is. Permission to once again reduce wolf population, the lowest 48, to 0. And we know that premature delisting hinders the ability of gray wolves to be delisted legitimately. Today, wolves continue to face ongoing serious threats to their survival, including poaching, habitat loss, and a patchwork of inconsistent state mismanagement. The protections of the ESA have allowed gray wolf populations across the country to stabilize and regain strength. If delisted nationally, gray wolves will once again be hunted and trapped to the point of extinction. If we actually wanted to trust the science, we see that the gray wolf has made progress in their recovery, but also that wolves in the northern Rocky Mountains are being killed in dramatic numbers, even the celebrated Yellowstone National Park's gray wolves. The Biden administration recognized this and put forth a national wolf recovery plan that was supposed to be released last week on December 12th. This highly anticipated plan would have developed a comprehensive nationwide recovery plan that would have engaged the public to help develop a unified recovery approach based on scientific evidence, but unfortunately, the Trump administration hastily announced its cancellation last November. By the way, the only reason Canadian wolves were necessary because we had killed every last lower 48 wolf. And finally, I have to address the spurious argument that protecting pets and livestock somehow is ample justification for delisting the wolves. In Montana, Mr. Speaker, fewer than 60 livestock out of almost 3 million are killed every year by wolves. That's a loss of one loss for every 50,000 cows or sheep. That is a very tiny loss ratio compared to deaths by accident, lightning, freezing temperature, and all the other natural hazards that come from living outside 365 days a year. Not to mention that most of these animals are being raised to be slaughtered. The numbers don't look much different in Wyoming or Idaho. And ranchers are compensated very generously for losses related to wolves, always more than market value, sometimes 3 times the value of the animal lost. Mr. Speaker, State Farm reported that 93,000 dogs, not 5 or 10, 93,000 were hit by cars in 2022, yet no one has suggested banishing automobiles. I love dogs. Most of us do. We know how smart and complicated and ferociously loyal they are. They are just wolves we have tamed. and there is abundant evidence that wolf families are more like human families than any other species. Wolves and men have evolved together over the millennia. One reason wolves show up in all our most important stories, poems, and songs. When we kill all the wolves, we kill something in our own humanity. When we deny our connection to nature and to what is beautiful and glorious. How can we proclaim the wonder of existence, the generosity of a loving God, and then hate the charismatic creatures he has also given to this world? I urge my colleagues to kill this bill. Thank you.
The gentlelady from Oregon reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the whole state of Virginia was at one time gray wolf habitat. Washington, D.C. had gray wolves. When are we going to turn them loose here on the Mall or in Old Town or whatever part of Virginia? This is a problem that seems to get exported to rural areas, and people turn a blind eye to what happens in the rural areas. Also, there's a difference between desiring fewer wolves and desiring no wolves. States where wolves have already been delisted have a proven track record of success, which has been confirmed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This bill does not prohibit the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from listing the wolf in the future if it determines a listing is warranted. However, as the service has confirmed multiple times, the gray wolf currently does not meet those criteria. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber.
The gentleman is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the newly formed Follow the Science Caucus, I rise today in strong support of a bill I am proud to co-sponsor, H.R. 845, the Pet and Livestock Protection Act. It's been proven time and time again that the gray wolf is not endangered and, in fact, has fully recovered. When the gray wolf was listed as threatened in Minnesota under the Endangered Species Act in 1978, a recovery goal of 1,250 to 1,400 wolves was set. Today, according to data from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, we have over 2,700 wolves in Minnesota. But, as my constituents would tell you, Mr. Chair, that is a severe undercount. It's more like 5,000 to 7,000 in Minnesota. Over half of the gray wolves across the lower 48 are in Minnesota, and most of them can be found in my district. The gray wolf might be one of the greatest success stories of the ESA, and one that should be celebrated. Now that the species has recovered, it's time to delist. But that's just not my opinion. It's a bipartisan view that's been held by several presidential administrations on both sides of the aisle. In 2009, the Bush administration delisted the gray wolves. Activist groups sued to relist. In 2013, the Obama administration delisted the gray wolves. Activist groups sued to relist. In 2020, the Trump administration delisted gray wolves. Activist groups sued to relist. And just last year, the Biden administration even agreed when they chose to defend the Trump administration's 2020 delisting rule. Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump, and even Biden trusted the science and sought to do the right thing. It's activist groups, with the help of activist judges, who continue to choose to disregard the science and fight to keep these unnecessary protections in place. As a result, my constituents have to face growing wolf populations in their backyards each and every day. Look at this photo right here to my right. Just last month in Neely, Minnesota, a wolf was seen in a school parking lot in the middle of the day, just feet from the schoolhouse door. And because of the gray wolf's listing status, nothing could be done to protect the lives of the students there. The broken ESA is putting my constituents' lives at risk. Simply said, it's beyond time that the gray wolf is delisted under the ESA. Unfortunately, as long as activists are willing to abuse our federal court system to weaponize the ESA, I'm afraid an administrative delisting will never be possible. There's only one alternative, Mr. Chair. Congress needs to act and finally vote in legislation to delist the gray wolves. You know, as a hunter in northern Minnesota, last year I held several town halls on the gray wolf and the concerns of delisting. Hunters for Hunters, Hunter Nation, other pro-hunting groups supported this endeavor. If you look at trail cams, for example, you'll see a nice, beautiful, in this case, 8-point buck. 10 minutes later, on the same trail cam, comes the wolf. Who knows what happened to that big, beautiful buck? The fact of the matter is we should celebrate the ESA, the accomplishment. The gray wolf has recovered. Let the states manage it. They can be more nimble than the federal government. I urge my colleagues to join me in support of this important piece of legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves.
reserves.
The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, look, I want to acknowledge that wolf livestock conflicts do happen, and ranchers deserve to be support when there's wolf problem. And we already have tools that work to address these conflicts, but this bill does nothing to improve them or to help our ranchers. H.R. 845 has no funding for conflict mitigation, no support for non-lethal deterrence, no additional compensation from losses. And if we want to delist wolves responsibly, we need to give Fish and Wildlife Service the resources and direction it needs to work collaboratively, respond to science, and invest in conflict prevention. And with that, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from California, the ranking member, Representative Huffman.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the gentlelady from Oregon. The gentlelady is right. If we want to talk about the occasional conflicts that exist between livestock and pets and any predators, that's a legitimate conversation. But what we are hearing from across the aisle is really jumping the shark, if you'll forgive another predator metaphor. We are being led to believe that packs of wolves are about to descend on urban areas in New England and Madison, Wisconsin, and that they are looming outside of schools. And you know, I think my colleagues across the aisle need to understand the American people are a little smarter than that. They're kind of going to see through this Little Red Riding Hood meets Chupacabra narrative that you were trying to spin to scare people about wolves. But let me tell you the way it actually works. The Endangered Species Act does not prevent wildlife managers from intervening anytime a wolf or any other predator threatens property or human beings. In fact, just a few weeks ago in Northern California, I believe it was the Sierra Valley, a pack of wolves from one of our packs there had begun preying on cattle in an area where they're concentrated because of the way they move through the state. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife came in and took some. I think they took 5 or 6 of them, killed them. There was no ESA lawsuit. There was no violation of the law. So a little reality check on what we just heard from my colleague from Minnesota, that there was nothing anyone could do about this scary Chupacabra wolf in the school parking lot. That's nonsense. That's not the way the ESA works. Now, let's be clear. This bill is not it's not about protecting pets or livestock. It's about politics overriding science. And the consequences of doing that are disastrous. The precedent set by this bill would be very troubling. It would tell wildlife scientists that their expertise doesn't matter. It tells tribal nations that their voices can be ignored, and it tells the American people they no longer have the right to challenge unlawful government actions. The ESA is simple and effective. It ensures decisions are grounded in science. That's the heart of it. And this bill throws that principle out the window. It mandates a nationwide delisting of gray wolves and explicitly blocks judicial review. It would prevent courts from doing their job to determine whether a government action even complies with the law. Now, we don't have to speculate about what happens when protections for gray wolves are lifted, because we've seen it play out in the state of Wisconsin, where hunters like the group Hunter Nation, which is led by Ted Nugent and Don Jr. on the board, swept in as soon as the wolf hunting season was open. Quickly, they did that despite objections from tribes in the region, and the result was devastating. 218 wolves, about 20% of the state's population, were wiped out. And by the end of the season, 30% were killed, nearly twice as many wolves as the state had authorized. And over the course of about 60 hours, thousands of hunters, including some unlicensed hunters, participated in coordinating hunting groups. They engaged in a dangerous, terrorizing campaign against the wolves using bait
and wolf calls. They hunted at night. They used dogs. 188 wolves were taken by dogs. They killed 130 wolf pups that were less than 2 years old. This is not thoughtful, science-based management of the state's wolf population. This is not celebrating the recovery of the wolf, as we keep hearing in this debate. This week, we received a letter from the Wisconsin tribes who had sued to try to stop that hunt. And in the letter, they object to this bill today. They point out the inadequacy of existing state-level regulatory mechanisms that led to that disaster in Wisconsin. I ask unanimous consent to enter that letter into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tribes support continued protection for wolves. 78% of Americans support continued protection for wolves. They want to see living wolf pups in Yellowstone, not news stories about tortured wolves in bars or wolf hunts with dogs. So I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill. And I would also like to just move to some additional remarks that are part of our motion to recommit. The entire debate so far has shown why members of Congress have no business in listing and delisting decisions. We are not scientific experts. We are not objective scientists tasked with assessing population numbers, recovery goals, and continued threats to the species, and that is why the ESA properly leaves those questions to actual experts, not politicians. For that reason, we shouldn't be passing this bill at all, but if Republicans are going to go down this road, then there should at least be some guardrails in place that are based on actual science. So for this reason, at the appropriate time, I'll offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee, and if the House rules permitted, I would have offered this motion with an important amendment to this bill. We were not allowed to do that. My amendment is straightforward. The NRA gets to have this bill and its little hunting spree, but if Ted Nugent and Don Jr. and all the other folks who need to do this to prove their manhood actually go where scientists have warned us about and take the wolf population down below science-based recovery standards, then the Secretary of Interior would have to issue an emergency regulation temporarily restoring federal protection in that instance. So this would provide a necessary backstop if Congress legislatively delists the gray wolf and it careens right back toward extinction again, which we know it would. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the text of this amendment. Hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit in a few moments and keeping a modicum of actual science in the Endangered Species Act. I yield back.
Without objection, the motion is agreed to. The gentlelady reserves from Oregon. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question. Which will it be? What's the good science? As I've mentioned before, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, all said the wolf has been recovered. The experts, the scientists at U.S. Fish and Wildlife have said it's been recovered. Yet my friends argue it's not been recovered because there's some places where its native range is that the wolf is not there. I remind everyone, we are in gray wolf territory, historical gray wolf territory. Now, Mr. Speaker, like many, like you probably and myself, I've walked around D.C. at night, and this is a rat-infested city. I think there would be at least a little bit of food for the wolves if we were to turn a pack loose on the mall. But what happens when they eat all the rats? What do they go after next? Now, this is a preposterous situation because I don't think anybody really wants a pack of wolves on the mall. But if you go down the logic trail that my colleagues are making, the wolf is not recovered until it's back in its historic range. So why do we want to say sit in a big city where wolves once were and say, we want wolves just not in our backyard. We want them out in the Midwest or the West where it's somebody else's problem, but we don't want those problems here because it makes no sense to put wolves back here in the big cities and across the Northeast. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California where they have a lot of wolves, Mr. LaMalfa.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, my colleague from Arkansas. It's amazing here. I represent the northeast corner of California where the wolves are being inflicted upon the people and the wildlife of that area. And the stuff I hear coming from the other side of the aisle about recovering the wolves and even the mocking, yes, it's real. There's wolves that are encroaching on elementary schools in Siskiyou County, the Little Shasta Elementary School. This isn't some Little Red Riding Hood story. This isn't some made-up deal. It's very real. And they're coming closer and closer to town all over the northeast part of California. So my colleague from the North Coast, when he mocks us like that, I'm wondering if this Proposition 50 in California kicks in, and he ends up representing my constituents up there that are fighting against this, and I'm their only voice in that echo chamber of California against this. Are you going to have town halls up there? Are you going to go into Modoc County, Siskiyou County, Sierra Valley, and tell them this is a Red Riding Hood story about the wolves devouring their livestock, eating up all their wildlife? It's the mocking. Why is it you can't stand?
The gentleman will suspend. The House will be in order. The gentleman may continue.
Why is it you can't stand the people that produce the food, the lumber that come from my part of the state, from the West, from the rural parts of America? Is it you want all of your beef? I guess if you don't eat beef, you might be able to have this conversation. If you want your beef to be imported from somewhere else, you don't want it not to be produced here under our standards, why is it you hate my constituents that just try and provide the urban people with what they need? Because we don't need a hell of a lot that's coming from the urban area, I'll tell you what. So if you want to cater only to Marin County and have this population continue to devastate our people up there and rein in just a little bit the misinterpretation of the Endangered Species Act over the 50 years, yeah, it was well-intentioned when it came out. It was a temporary tool, but it never was meant to be a life or even a death sentence for livestock and for people's livelihoods in this area of here or all over the West. So this is a clear example of how the ESD has drifted a long ways from that. And it's high time that people have tools, especially my home state of California, where they have no tools until the Fish and Game finally decides to come in and pretend to do something.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Bentz.
The gentleman is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 845. The bill would address at least some of the injury and injustice being inflicted upon my state and my constituents by the inappropriate and unfair enforcement of the Endangered Species Act as it has been applied in the reintroduction of the gray wolf. This injustice is apparent in the federal government's inability to manage and control the killing, the maiming, and the terrorizing of thousands of head of livestock across my district, across the rest of the United States, and in the failure of the government to properly pay for the cost of its decision to reintroduce the wolf. I will address the lack of management first. Let me begin my discussion of failed management by showing several pictures which are graphic illustrations of the lurking reality that many of my ranching families must deal with every single day. As you can see, there's nothing refined about how a wolf goes about feeding itself. You can only imagine the feelings of the rancher when he or she finds their livestock torn apart or dying. You can try to imagine the anger they feel knowing that they are legally prevented from stopping that wolf before it causes this pain and horror to their cattle and calves, and stopping these animals from doing, the wolves, this over and over again and again. I've held meeting after meeting across my district listening over and over to stories about wolves attacking herds, scattering to the four winds terrified cattle and calves, and ignoring the sad hazing efforts that we heard about earlier from across the aisle that livestock owners are reduced to using under the law to try to protect their livelihoods. The fury, the anger, the frustration, the fear of wolf that may at some point attack a child, which it came close to doing earlier last year while children in my district were waiting for a school bus, is totally understandable, and why we're on this floor sharing the reality of the wolf in America today. If we're to protect those who are trying their best to feed this country, to make a living, to keep their communities viable and safe, to put out range fires, to pay their taxes, and continue to be productive parts of this nation, we must manage the wolf, and this means we must delist the wolf and move management of these creatures back to the states. Remember, this is exactly what the Democrat, Obama and Biden administration, and Republican, Bush and Trump administrations have agreed needed to be done literally years ago. The wolf listed status continues only because of judicial fiat. Let me turn to the actual cost of reintroduction of the wolf and the need for those who have created this cost to be responsible for paying for it. University studies show that the annual cost of the wolf to the cattle business as of a few years ago is estimated to be $128 million. That's each year. This number far higher now that cattle prices are higher. Many think the only cost of the wolf is the killing of the livestock. But the impact of the primal fear and terror cattle understandably feel when a wolf is near has dramatic and serious impacts on weight gain and on pregnancy rates. These losses in production are real and they are serious. In a time when even the president is concerned about beef prices, these losses affect everyone by causing a reduction in the size of America's cattle herd and, of course, their productivity. In recognition of this damage caused by the wolf, laws have been enacted some in the Big Beautiful Bill and some at the state level to try to bring at least some ESA reimbursement equity into play by providing some payment to the owners for the death of cattle caused by wolves. But these programs come nowhere close to offsetting the very real loss. And I can assure you, the rancher would be absolutely happier if he or she could completely avoid these losses that lead to asking for justice under these programs. If we are to properly and fairly and logically manage the wolf, we must pass Congresswoman Boebert's and Tom Tiffany's bill, H.R. 845, the Pet and Livestock Protection Act. This bill would federally delist the wolf and allow states to actually manage wolf populations, not exterminate, manage. And if we are to properly allocate responsibility for the monetary cost of the wolf, that is, for the cost of the Endangered Species Act, America itself must pay for the consequences of this law, and this means Congress must manage the problem and then appropriate dollars to pay for it. Let's begin by passing this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yield back.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crink.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Pet and Livestock Protection Act, which I'm a co-sponsor of, led by my friends Representative Boebert and Representative Tiffany. The truth is, Congress should not have to step in to delist the gray wolf here, but here we are. That's because the Endangered Species Act listing process no longer works as it was intended to do. The gray wolf has exceeded recovery goals, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, under both Republican and Democrat administrations, has repeatedly concluded that the species should be delisted. Yet every time, radical groups, litigious groups, step in to block that decision. They ignore science, they ignore facts, and they ignore the law. They don't want recovery, they want permanent federal control. And meanwhile, wolves are wreaking unchecked havoc on ranchers, on farmers, on wildlife, and on rural communities who are paying the price. In the state of Wyoming, since they reintroduced the wolf, their moose population has decreased by 80%. So why are we choosing wolves over moose in the state of Wyoming? I spend more time in wolf country than probably many of the members on this House floor. The elk populations are being decimated. They're starved. They are, I hear my colleagues on the other side talking about in 4 days they killed 30 wolves. You know what? That's called wildlife management. You can do that. You know, when you have a hunting season for deer and you set a goal to kill 200 deer, there's 200 deer killed in a week. It's wildlife management. That's what we do. And that's what the professionals do and do exceedingly well. I find it interesting that it's the people in this chamber who don't have wolves in their district who want wolves in other people's districts. Thank you. I yield back. Thank you.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will just clarify, I said in 4 days, 30% of the wolf population was killed. 30%, not 30 wolves. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire of how much time we have remaining?
The gentleman from Arkansas has 3 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Hurd.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am an original co-sponsor of the Pet and Livestock Protection Act because it delists the gray wolf under the Endangered Species Act. This gives wildlife managers more control in states while protecting domestic animals from wolf attacks. For years, Republican and Democratic administrations alike under Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden have all reached the same conclusion. The gray wolf population is healthy, has exceeded all recovery goals, and can sustain life from a variety of threats and should be delisted. The Endangered Species Act was never meant to be a permanent listing statute. It was designed to recover species, and once recovery is achieved, to step back. But that's not what's happening. Environmental groups have repeatedly run to courts to block delisting, ignoring the science, and overriding bipartisan agency findings. The cost is regulatory whiplash, uncertainty, and paralysis, while ranchers, landowners, and rural communities pay the price. Mr. Speaker, I want to respond to something that was said at the beginning of this debate. One of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle criticized this Congress for discussing wolves and said we should be focused on affordability. Well, first of all, we have been and are voting on bills that improve life and make it more affordable for every American. But here's the thing. For the ranchers and outfitters in rural Coloradans that I represent, this is affordability. This is their livelihood. This is how food gets to tables across America, whether you live in a small town or in the largest city. This is a way of life that America depends on, and it deserves respect, not dismissal. H.R. 845 is supported by science, it respects each state's circumstances, and it delivers protection for rural America. I urge support and yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. H.R. 845 delists the gray wolf across the United States and blocks judicial review of the delisting. This is an anti-science bill that prioritizes politics ahead of species conservation. This bill will result in hundreds of unnecessary and indiscriminate wolf kills while doing very little to address the legitimate conflicts between some wolves and livestock, and I'll work with anyone on addressing those legitimate conflicts. We have tools and funding available to address those concerns, not enough, but we have those, without undermining the progress we've made to recover this iconic species. So I urge my colleagues to vote no on H.R. 845, and I yield back.
Does the gentlelady yield? Gentlelady reserves.
Yield.
The gentlelady yields. The gentleman from Arkansas.
Mr. Speaker, the facts and the science are clear. The gray wolf is a recovered species. It's time for America to celebrate that, and Congress needs to act to make that happen. By passing this bill, Congress would be celebrating an ESA success story and endorsing the bipartisan policy of 4 successive presidential administrations, namely to trust the science and delist the gray wolf. I again want to thank Congresswoman Boebert and Congressman Tiffany for their strong leadership on this important legislation. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 951, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on Grossman and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Third reading.
Union Calendar Number 285, H.R. 845, a bill to require the Secretary of the Interior to reissue regulations removing the gray wolf from the list of endangered and threatened wildlife under the Endangered Species Act of 1973.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Huffman of California moves to recommit the bill H.R. 845 to the Committee on Natural Resources.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those in favor of vote by yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.